In today's episode, we will uncover how these horrifying pets ate their owners in front of everyone, from a rehabilitation specialist's dangerous demonstration to an animal dealer's birthday celebration that went horribly wrong. But first, an animal trainer's attempt to prove her connection with an apex predator leads to an unthinkable tragedy. It was March 15th, 2014, in the desolate stretches of rural Nevada, where the nearest neighbor lived 3 miles away, and the desert wind carried sounds for miles across the barren landscape. The Parker property sat isolated among scattered sagebrush and rocky outcroppings, a modest ranch house surrounded by makeshift animal enclosures that violated every zoning law in the county. Emily Parker, 34, had once commanded respect as an exotic animal trainer for traveling circuses across the American Southwest. Her career ended abruptly 2 years earlier when a tiger knocked her down during a routine performance, crushing her left leg and leaving her with a pronounced limp that served as a constant reminder of nature's unpredictability. The insurance settlement provided enough money to purchase the Nevada property and pursue her obsession with big cats as a private collector. Emily's arrogant personality had only intensified since her accident. She frequently boasted to anyone who would listen about her supernatural ability to communicate with dangerous predators, claiming she possessed an innate understanding that separated her from ordinary people. The centerpiece of her collection was a 400-pound male African lion named Caesar, housed in a reinforced steel enclosure she had constructed behind her house using salvaged circus equipment. On this particular Saturday afternoon, Emily had invited 5 neighbors to a backyard barbecue, eager to demonstrate her supposed mastery over the apex predator. The guests sat uncomfortably in lawn chairs positioned 20 feet from the enclosure, watching Caesar pace restlessly behind the heavy-gauge fencing while Emily consumed her 4th beer of the afternoon. African lions are among the most powerful predators on Earth, capable of generating bite forces exceeding 650 pounds per square inch. Adult males like Caesar typically weigh between 350 and 420 pounds, with muscular frames designed for taking down prey much larger than humans. Their retractable claws can extend up to 1.5 inches in length, while their canine teeth measure nearly 3 inches and are specifically evolved for puncturing vital organs and crushing bone. As the afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon, Emily announced her intention to enter Caesar's enclosure to prove her special connection with the animal. Despite protests from her guests, she fumbled with the heavy padlock securing the gate, her movements clumsy from alcohol consumption. The metallic click of the lock opening seemed to trigger an immediate change in Caesar's demeanor. The moment Emily stepped through the gate, Caesar launched himself forward with explosive force. His massive jaws clamped down on her right shoulder with devastating precision, the 4-inch canine teeth penetrating completely through muscle and sinew before grinding against bone. Emily's shoulder blade cracked audibly under the crushing pressure as Caesar's powerful neck muscles began shaking her body like a rag doll. Caesar's front claws extended fully, raking across Emily's chest in parallel lines that opened her flesh from collarbone to sternum. The razor-sharp talons sliced through skin, fat, and muscle tissue with surgical precision, exposing the white gleam of ribs beneath. Blood sprayed in arterial spurts as major vessels were severed, painting the enclosure walls in crimson streaks. The lion's violent shaking motion generated tremendous torque forces that Emily's body could not withstand. Her left arm separated completely at the elbow joint, torn away by the combination of Caesar's grip and the centrifugal force of his movements. The severed limb landed in the dirt 15 feet away, still twitching from residual nerve activity. Emily collapsed to the ground as massive blood loss rapidly drained her strength. Caesar maintained his grip on her mangled shoulder while his hind claws continued raking across her torso, opening deep furrows that exposed internal organs. Within 4 minutes of the initial attack, Emily's heart stopped beating from catastrophic blood loss and traumatic shock. Caesar began methodically tearing chunks of flesh from Emily's chest and arms, his powerful jaws designed for processing large carcasses. The lion consumed approximately 12 pounds of muscle tissue over the next 15 minutes, focusing primarily on the protein-rich areas around her shoulders and upper arms. His feeding behavior was entirely natural, following instinctive patterns developed over millions of years of evolution. Emergency responders arrived 23 minutes after the initial 911 call, but Caesar continued feeding until tranquilizer darts finally subdued him. The Nevada Department of Wildlife immediately seized the animal and launched an investigation into illegal exotic animal ownership. Emily's family released a brief statement expressing their grief while declining further comment. The incident sparked renewed debate about private ownership of dangerous predators, with animal rights groups citing Emily's death as evidence of inadequate regulations. Emily Parker's story showed how quickly overconfidence turns deadly with apex predators. For James Whitaker, professional experience led him to one fatal decision involving the ancient predator in his backyard waters. It was July 8, 2016, in the humid backwoods of East Texas, where the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the Whitaker family property. The sprawling rural homestead sat nestled among towering pine trees and thick undergrowth, with a large artificial pond dominating the backyard. This wasn't an ordinary swimming hole. It housed a 12-foot American alligator that James Whitaker had rescued from illegal captivity 8 years prior. The property stretched across 5 acres of dense woodland, isolated from neighboring homes by thick vegetation and winding dirt roads. James Whitaker, a 41-year-old wildlife rehabilitation specialist, had built his reputation working at the local reptile rescue center. His colleagues knew him as someone who pushed boundaries, often dismissing safety protocols with a wave of his hand and a confident grin. The massive alligator in his backyard pond had become his pride and joy, a testament to his expertise with dangerous reptiles. On this sweltering summer day, 12 family members had gathered for their annual reunion, including several young children who gazed wide-eyed at the prehistoric predator lurking beneath the murky water. The concrete-lined pond stretched 40 feet across, surrounded by wooden decking where folding chairs had been arranged for the family gathering. Barbecue smoke drifted from nearby grills as relatives chatted nervously about James's unusual pet. The American alligator represents one of nature's most efficient killing machines, unchanged for millions of years. These apex predators can grow up to 14 feet long and weigh over 1,000 pounds. Their jaws generate a crushing force of 2,980 pounds per square inch, while their signature death roll technique disorients prey and tears flesh from bone. Alligators are ambush hunters, capable of explosive bursts of speed that can propel their massive bodies completely out of the water in seconds. Their muscular tails serve as powerful rudders during aquatic attacks, while their armored hide provides protection from struggling prey. Adult alligators can hold their breath underwater for up to 24 hours, making them nearly impossible to escape once they initiate an attack. James decided to demonstrate his mastery over the beast by feeding it by hand, despite having proper feeding tools available. He waded into the murky pond carrying a raw chicken, water reaching his waist, as his family gathered along the concrete edge. The alligator's eyes and nostrils remained barely visible above the surface, tracking James's every movement with predatory focus. Several relatives urged him to use the feeding pole instead, but James dismissed their concerns with characteristic overconfidence. Without warning, the massive reptile exploded from the water with terrifying speed. Its enormous jaws, lined with 80 razor-sharp teeth, clamped down on James's right forearm with bone-crushing force. The impact sent water cascading in all directions as James's startled cry echoed across the property. The alligator immediately initiated its death roll, a violent spinning motion designed to disorient prey and tear flesh from bone. James disappeared beneath the churning water as the 12-foot predator rotated with mechanical precision. His body spun helplessly in the alligator's grip, the tremendous torque twisting his arm beyond its natural limits. The violent rotation continued for 3 agonizing minutes, each roll driving James deeper underwater and further from any chance of rescue. His right arm separated from his shoulder socket with a sickening pop, torn ligaments and shattered bone creating a crimson cloud in the murky water. Blood bubbled to the surface as the death roll continued relentlessly. When the death roll finally ceased, James had drowned. The alligator surfaced with his lifeless body still clamped firmly in its jaws, water streaming from its prehistoric skull. What followed horrified the 12 family members, who stood frozen in shock along the pond's edge. The reptile began methodically tearing large chunks of flesh from James's torso, its powerful neck muscles allowing it to shake and rip with devastating efficiency. The alligator performed additional death rolls to dismember the body into manageable pieces. James's left leg separated completely during one particularly violent rotation, the massive reptile swallowing the entire limb while his relatives screamed in helpless terror. For 20 excruciating minutes, the prehistoric predator continued feeding in full view of the traumatized family, including the children who would carry these images for the rest of their lives. Local authorities arrived to find a scene of unimaginable carnage. The Texas Parks and Wildlife Department launched an investigation into the incident, questioning why a private citizen was permitted to house such a dangerous animal on residential property. James's colleagues at the Reptile Rescue Center expressed shock at his decision to enter the enclosure, noting that proper feeding protocols existed for exactly this reason. His family struggled to comprehend how their reunion celebration had transformed into an unspeakable nightmare. The tragedy sparked renewed debate about private ownership of dangerous wildlife, with legislators calling for stricter regulations. Emergency responders required specialized equipment to safely remove the alligator from the property. The Reptile Rescue Center, where James worked, implemented mandatory safety training following the incident. James Whitaker's story was a devastating reminder of how overconfidence with apex predators can turn deadly. For Rachel Bennett, it wasn't a backyard demonstration, but a routine evening task that would prove equally fatal. It was September 22, 2015, in the remote wilderness of rural Montana, where autumn mist clung to towering pine trees and the nearest neighbor lived 15 miles away. The 40-acre mountain property sat in complete isolation, surrounded by dense forest that stretched endlessly toward the Canadian border. Here, among the rugged terrain and crisp mountain air, Rachel Bennett had built her dream sanctuary for rescued bears. Rachel Bennett, 52 years old, had spent 25 years as a park ranger before retiring to pursue her passion for wildlife rehabilitation. Her weathered hands and determined expression reflected decades of working with dangerous animals, though her stubborn personality often clashed with established safety protocols. She had purchased the remote Montana property 3 years earlier, constructing large fenced enclosures to house 3 rescued grizzly bears that had been deemed unsuitable for release into the wild. Her husband, David, a quiet man who supported her mission despite his growing concerns about her increasingly reckless behavior, accompanied her during the evening feeding routines that had become their daily ritual. The couple had moved to Montana seeking solitude and purpose, but the isolation that Rachel craved would ultimately become her downfall. The grizzly bear represents one of North America's most formidable predators, with adult males weighing up to 800 pounds and possessing jaw strength capable of crushing bowling balls. These massive omnivores can run 35 miles per hour and stand over 8 feet tall on their hind legs. Their 4-inch claws and powerful limbs make them perfectly designed killing machines, evolved over thousands of years to dominate their territory through sheer physical superiority. Despite their bulky appearance, grizzlies possess remarkable agility and intelligence, making them unpredictable and extremely dangerous when threatened or territorial. As twilight descended over the sanctuary, Rachel approached the largest enclosure housing Bruno, a 600-pound male grizzly rescued from a roadside attraction 2 years prior. The massive bear paced restlessly behind the 12-foot chain-link fence, his dark eyes tracking Rachel's movements as she prepared his evening meal. During the feeding process, Rachel accidentally dropped a metal food bucket inside the enclosure, watching it clatter against the rocky ground just 20 feet from where Bruno stood motionless. Against every safety protocol she had learned during her ranger career, Rachel decided to retrieve the bucket immediately rather than wait until the next morning. She ignored David's protests and climbed over the fence, her boots hitting the ground with a soft thud that instantly captured Bruno's attention. The massive grizzly's ears flattened against his skull as he registered the human intrusion into his territory. Bruno charged with explosive speed, covering the distance in seconds as his massive paws thundered against the earth. Rachel turned toward the fence, but had no time to escape as the bear's enormous body slammed into her chest with devastating force. The impact launched her backward, her ribs cracking audibly as Bruno's razor-sharp claws raked across her face, tearing through skin and muscle with surgical precision. Deep gashes opened from her forehead to her chin, blood streaming down her neck as she collapsed onto the rocky ground. The grizzly immediately clamped his powerful jaws around Rachel's head, his 4-inch canine teeth penetrating her skull with a sickening crunch. The immense pressure crushed bone fragments into her brain tissue as Bruno lifted her entire body off the ground, shaking her violently from side to side like a rag doll. The violent motion snapped Rachel's neck with an audible crack, her spine severing completely as her body went limp in the bear's grasp. Bruno released his grip and immediately began feeding, using his claws to tear open Rachel's abdomen with methodical precision. The bear consumed her internal organs systematically, his massive head disappearing inside her torso as he devoured liver, kidneys, and intestines. David watched in paralyzed horror from outside the fence, unable to intervene as the grizzly spent the next 30 minutes methodically consuming Rachel's remains. The bear stripped flesh from her limbs with practiced efficiency, crunching through bones and cartilage as he satisfied his predatory instincts. Emergency responders arrived 2 hours later to find only Rachel's partially intact head and scattered ribcage fragments remaining in the blood-soaked enclosure. The Montana Fish and Wildlife Department launched an immediate investigation into the sanctuary's safety protocols, while Rachel's family struggled to comprehend the brutal circumstances of her death. Bruno was subsequently euthanized, ending his troubled existence that had begun in captivity and concluded with fatal violence. The tragic incident highlighted the inherent dangers of private wildlife sanctuaries operating without proper oversight, prompting new legislation requiring enhanced safety measures. Rachel Bennett's story showed how rescued predators turn lethal when safety fails. For Tyler Morgan, it wasn't a land predator, but Bahamian waters that led him one step too far. It was August 3, 2017, in the crystal-clear waters off Nassau, Bahamas. The Caribbean sun blazed overhead as gentle swells rocked the research vessel, anchored above a known bull shark feeding ground. The shallow reef system, with its maze of coral formations and sandy channels, created the perfect hunting territory for one of the ocean's most aggressive predators. Tyler Morgan, a 38-year-old marine biologist from the University of Miami, had spent months planning this expedition to study bull shark feeding patterns in their natural habitat. Tyler specialized in shark behavior research and had built his reputation on collecting data that others deemed too dangerous to pursue. His reckless approach to fieldwork had yielded groundbreaking insights, but colleagues often questioned his methods. This week-long research trip included 3 fellow scientists who shared his passion for understanding these apex predators. They had chartered a 40-foot vessel equipped with a reinforced shark cage, underwater cameras, and monitoring equipment designed to capture unprecedented footage of bull shark feeding behavior. Bull sharks represent one of the most formidable predators in tropical waters. These massive creatures can reach lengths of 11 feet and weights exceeding 500 pounds. Unlike their oceanic cousins, bull sharks thrive in shallow coastal waters, making them particularly dangerous to humans. Their powerful jaws generate bite forces of over 1,300 pounds per square inch, while their broad, triangular teeth are perfectly designed for tearing flesh. Their aggressive nature and territorial behavior make them responsible for more unprovoked attacks on humans than any other shark species, except great whites. The research team had successfully deployed their shark cage 30 feet below the surface, with Tyler and his colleagues taking turns documenting feeding patterns. Multiple bull sharks had been circling the area, drawn by the scent trail from their bait stations. Tyler was photographing a particularly large 10-foot female when his underwater camera slipped from his grip, sinking toward the sandy bottom outside the protective cage. Against all safety protocols, Tyler exited the cage to retrieve the expensive equipment. His colleagues watched in horror from inside the protective barrier as he swam downward, completely exposed in open water. The massive bull shark detected his movement immediately, its powerful tail propelling it forward with explosive speed. The shark struck Tyler's left leg with tremendous force, its jaws clamping down just above the knee. The impact was so violent that the audible crack of Tyler's femur bone breaking echoed through the water. The shark began thrashing its head from side to side, using its body weight to tear through muscle and bone. Tyler's leg twisted at an unnatural angle as the shark's serrated teeth severed major blood vessels and shredded tissue. After releasing the mangled leg, the shark immediately attacked Tyler's torso, its jaws closing around his left shoulder and chest area. The massive teeth punctured his lung and severed the subclavian artery, causing massive internal bleeding. Tyler's movements became increasingly weak as blood poured from multiple wounds, creating a crimson cloud in the surrounding water. The bull shark released Tyler's torso and circled briefly before returning for another attack. This time, it clamped down on Tyler's right arm, the powerful jaws crushing bone and completely severing the limb at the shoulder. Tyler's body went limp as shock and blood loss overwhelmed his system, but the shark was far from finished. Over the next 40 minutes, the colleagues trapped in the cage watched helplessly as the bull shark systematically dismembered Tyler's body. The predator made repeated feeding passes, tearing away large sections of his torso and consuming them. Tyler's left leg was completely severed and devoured, followed by his remaining arm. The shark's feeding frenzy intensified as it detected no resistance from its prey. The massive bull shark continued its methodical consumption, using its powerful jaws to tear away chunks of Tyler's abdomen and chest cavity. Each attack removed substantial portions of tissue and bone, leaving increasingly less of the marine biologist's body. The shark's feeding behavior demonstrated the efficient killing machine that Tyler had spent his career studying. When the bull shark finally departed the area, only Tyler's head and a small portion of his upper rib cage remained floating in the blood-stained water. The research team, traumatized by witnessing their colleagues' complete consumption, remained in the protective cage for another hour before attempting recovery. The Bahamian Coast Guard launched an immediate investigation into the incident, while Tyler's university suspended all shark research programs pending a comprehensive safety review. The scientific community mourned the loss of a brilliant researcher whose passion ultimately led to his demise. Tyler Morgan's story was a devastating reminder of how quickly apex predators turn deadly when safety protocols fail. For Lisa Campbell, The threat came not from the wild, but from a captive chimpanzee. It was November 12, 2013, in rural Oklahoma, where the autumn wind swept across endless plains dotted with oil derricks and abandoned farmsteads. Lisa Campbell's converted warehouse facility sat isolated on 40 acres of scrubland, surrounded by rusted chain-link fencing and overgrown vegetation. The 29-year-old exotic animal dealer had transformed the industrial building into her private zoo, housing everything from pythons to prairie dogs in makeshift enclosures. Behind the main structure, a modified garage served as home to her prized possession, a 150-pound adult male chimpanzee named Caesar. Lisa's questionable permits and cocky demeanor had earned her a reputation among local authorities, but she dismissed their concerns with characteristic arrogance. She genuinely believed primates were nothing more than oversized, playful pets. On this particular evening, 6 friends had gathered to celebrate her birthday, drawn by promises of an exclusive meet and greet with her exotic collection. The warehouse buzzed with nervous excitement as guests sipped beer and examined the various animals through reinforced glass barriers. The temperature had dropped to near freezing, forcing everyone indoors where the heating system struggled against the building's poor insulation. Chimpanzees represent one of humanity's closest evolutionary relatives, sharing approximately 98% of our DNA. Adult males can weigh up to 200 pounds and possess strength 5 times greater than an average human. Their powerful jaws house razor-sharp canine teeth capable of crushing bone, while their muscular arms can generate crushing force exceeding 1,300 pounds per square inch. Despite their intelligence and occasional gentle behavior, chimpanzees remain unpredictable wild animals with territorial instincts and aggressive tendencies that can trigger without warning. In captivity, these primates often develop psychological disorders that amplify their natural aggression. As the evening progressed, Lisa decided to showcase her supposed mastery over Caesar by entering his enclosure with a birthday cake. She dismissed her friends' concerns and approached the massive primate without backup personnel or protective equipment. Caesar sat motionless in the corner, his dark eyes tracking Lisa's movements as she stepped through the reinforced door. The chimpanzee's muscles tensed beneath his coarse black fur as Lisa extended the cake toward him with a confident smile. The concrete floor beneath her feet was stained with years of accumulated waste and food remnants. Caesar's massive hand shot forward with lightning speed, his fingers wrapping around Lisa's wrist with bone-crushing force. The audible snap of breaking radius and ulna bones echoed through the garage as the chimpanzee twisted her arm with mechanical precision. Lisa's scream pierced the air as Caesar's grip tightened, his knuckles whitening against her pale skin. The primate's other hand seized her shoulder, pulling her closer with irresistible strength. The birthday cake was scattered across the floor, frosting mixing with dirt and debris. Caesar's canine teeth, each measuring over an inch in length, punctured the major arteries in Lisa's neck with surgical precision. Crimson blood sprayed across the concrete walls as the chimpanzee's jaws clamped down, severing muscle tissue and crushing her windpipe. His powerful hands gripped her scalp, fingers digging deep into flesh as he began tearing away large sections of skin and hair. Lisa's body convulsed as blood loss rapidly drained her strength, her legs buckling beneath Caesar's relentless assault. The chimpanzee's teeth found her face, shredding through cheek muscles and exposing the underlying bone structure. Caesar methodically consumed the soft tissue, his jaw muscles working rhythmically as he chewed. Lisa's fingers disappeared into the primate's mouth one by one, the crunching of small bones audible above her weakening gasps. After 2 minutes of continuous mauling, her body collapsed onto the blood-soaked concrete, life ebbing away as Caesar continued his gruesome feast. For 20 agonizing minutes, the chimpanzee fed on Lisa's remains while her friends stood paralyzed beyond the enclosure door. Caesar consumed portions of her scalp, face, and neck with methodical precision, pausing occasionally to examine his work before resuming. The rescue team that finally arrived discovered Lisa's partially consumed body, her features rendered unrecognizable by the sustained attack. The Oklahoma Department of Wildlife launched an immediate investigation into Lisa's facility, discovering numerous permit violations and unsafe housing conditions. Caesar was subsequently euthanized, while Lisa's remaining animals were relocated to accredited sanctuaries. Her family released a brief statement expressing their grief and requesting privacy during their time of mourning. Local news outlets covered the story extensively, sparking debates about private exotic animal ownership. The Campbell incident highlighted the deadly consequences of underestimating wild animals, but it would not be the last time overconfidence proved fatal. If these horrifying pet attacks left you speechless, click the next video now to witness even more shocking moments when exotic animals turned deadly.